We're talking about the Gemini gifts this week. So these are not talks for Geminis. You have Gemini in your chart. You are run by your Gemini energy. And I promise you that. I don't have to know you to know that. And I know that because our minds are like our slave drivers. They can be our very worst enemies, but they can also help us to do everything that we came down here to do. They can open doors. They can expand us. We have this balance that we're always trying to seek with the mind. And we're going to talk about that today as we go into the gifts of Gemini. I'm Natha Perkins. This is Astrology for Awakening. This is my class where I bring all of you through the zodiac. We're going through all these facets of sun signs because we all have the sun signs within us. And the more self-aware we are, the more useful we are to the planet. And then also to our own soul's evolution. So this is about understanding. This is so much more than astrology. This is spiritual guidance. This is an awakening for you. This is a mirror. I hold it up. You look at yourself and you say, oh, that reminds me of me. I do that. I love that. I want to do it more, or I do that and I would like to stop it. So we're looking at our patterns, our blind spots, and then also at our gifts and our skills and what's amazing. Today, we're looking at the mind. What's going to follow is a talk that I released in 2024 on my podcast, Star Narratives, talking about Gemini. I'm re-releasing them on YouTube because I want them to be a standalone body of work so that you can go in and binge these episodes. They're all organized. Every single astrology sign is a complete archetype of our human nature, our human experience. And by studying all 12 of the signs, which also include the planets that correspond to those and the houses, you will have a beautifully organized map to self-understand, to really get in there and say, ooh, what's the shadow side of me there? What's the gift for me there? How am I acting this out? How do I need to evolve from this pattern? So it's cool. These are binge worthy. I highly suggest that you start listening and don't stop until you're done and then listen to them again, because this is some of the most powerful access into you that you're going to find anywhere. So if you like my style, I'm Natha Perkins. Did I already say that? I'm Natha Perkins of Electra Astrology. You can find me at electraastrology.com. I have so many offerings, readings. I have lots of stuff to help you get to where you're going. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're going somewhere, you are awakening and you know it, you might need a little guidance. I can help you. All right, let's jump in. I really feel Gemini a lot. I have a lot of Gemini in my chart. And so my brain is naturally fast moving and there are a million things going on. And I always have tons of questions. I want to get down into the details and understand, like, why is it like that? What does that mean? So I am asking you, as you're listening to this, to think back over the last week or two and get a sense of how your mind has been impacted by Gemini. I am asking you questions designed for inquiry so that you can use these archetypes to understand yourself better. This week, we're talking about the Gemini gifts. One of the things that I love so much about having such strong Gemini is my curiosity. And I have gotten this feedback. People say, why do you ask so many questions? It's true. I do ask a lot of questions. I get really curious about what people have eaten for dinner. It's about who said what to who, about how somebody's day was. And my kids and my family can all report that I am a questioner. And it is because I'm interested. That is one of the Gemini gifts, this distinct curiosity. Gemini, ruled by Mercury, is a seeker of information. And Gemini, if you think about the whole astrological zodiac as a kingdom, and then we dial down in and we say, we are each our own kingdom. And we say that Mercury is the messenger. Mercury is the page. Mercury is the one that goes around and visits all of the different parts of the kingdom, all of the different lords and ladies and fields and whatnot. and gathers the information and then brings it back to the king and the queen. So we're going to move into Cancer and Leo next, but I look at the moon as the queen and I look at the sun as the king. We say with Mercury, that is the messenger god. That is the messenger that brings the messages to your internal queen, your emotional ruler, and your internal king, your sense of solidity and self. And so it is very important that we nurture our Mercury and that we accept our curiosity and that we ask the questions that are important to gather the information. Now, Gemini people also tend to be fun. They love to laugh. They love to make light of things because they are so quick at assimilating information. And remember, we all have Gemini in our chart. You don't have to have a strong Gemini signature to experience these things. And I would say that over the past few weeks, that you, even if you have no Gemini, have been experiencing this curiosity, this wanting to know and wanting to assess and wanting to have some fun with the information that's coming in. I think that that's one beautiful thing about Gemini that we can all really tap into is the humor. Being able to see the humor in some of this information that's coming in, being able to just do nothing other than throw your hands up and laugh about situations that might seem frustrating or situations that have no answers. So we look at Gemini as what kind of messages is your brain bringing you? What kind of messages is your internal Mercury bringing to your king and your queen? And then how are you choosing to process them? Because we do have a choice. And that is one of the beauties of Gemini is that it does not like to get deep. It does not want to go underneath and deeply explore in the same way that a sign like Scorpio would or a sign like Cancer. Gemini being air, it is much more concerned with resting on the surface and gathering as much information as possible so that you can put it together, but also having some fun. And that's why we say Gemini is represented by the archetype of the twins, because it can hold varying perceptions. And it also knows how to have fun, even when the facts don't necessarily seem very fun. So this week, see whether you can tap into some of that fun and see the lighter side of some of the stuff happening, because, it's pretty heavy out there. I don't think any of us can deny that. There's a lot that is very confusing. There's a lot that we don't understand. And there's a lot that when we feel like we understand it can feel very defeating. And so with Gemini, this is where we actually have a choice to lighten it up and just see some humor in some of the details. Gemini, like we have talked about, is also intelligent, is very good at processing information that comes in. There are different forms of intelligence. And I think that's important to take that into account, because if we are on autopilot, we might think that going to school, going to a fancy university, getting straight A's is what means that you're intelligent. But one of the things that I like so much about Gemini is that it is so mutable. And it really speaks to their having so many different kinds of intelligence. So that is something for you to think about and maybe do some journaling on, is what kind of intelligence do you have? I remember thinking when I was younger, because my sister was very smart. She always got very good grades. She indeed did go to fancy universities. And I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, she must be smarter than me. But when it comes to other things, like, for instance, an intuitiveness, being able to understand the workings of the human psyche, that is something that I excel at. Not to say that she doesn't excel at that as well, but I would be remiss to think that I was not intelligent simply because I wasn't a straight A student. And believe me, I wasn't. So that's an exercise that you can do as you are really sitting with Gemini, is understanding your own version of intelligence, understanding that we all process information in different ways. And we could look at the elements for that. And we could look and say, if your Mercury, and by the way, you can just pull this up on a site like justastrology.com, put in your birth data, If your Mercury, which is the planet of the mind, is in a fire sign, you are probably going to process information faster. You might be more likely to take action. If your Mercury is in an earth sign, you might process information slower, and you might need a lot of time to really parse through it and get a sense of what's there before you can do anything with it. If your Mercury is in an air sign, then you are looking at having a very quick mind that processes information very quickly. And if your Mercury is in a water sign, then you're going to be processing your information through the lens of emotions. And even just with those four delineations, you can see that not everybody is going to be good at all kinds of processing. The air people are not going to know what to do when there's an emotional situation. The fire people are not going to be comfortable in a situation where they have to take their time. The earth people are not going to want to process information quickly. And the water people are certainly not going to want to process using logic, because logic is so different than feelings. Understanding your own sense of intelligence is a really important part of working with Mercury. It is also related to the way that we communicate with people. If you aren't totally aware of how you process information and you're kind of going by the seat of your pants, or you're expecting yourself to do it the way that your friend does, or your partner or your parent does, that is going to throw you off in the realm of communication. And Mercury in Gemini definitely rules communication. And we also know that when we're doing this spiritual awakening work, if you're listening to this podcast and you are wanting to become more self-aware, that your communication with people is one of the very first stops on that train. Learning how to communicate better, learning how to listen, learning how to make eye contact, learning how to ask for what you need, and how to have a productive discourse of back and forth, knowing how to express something that you're feeling emotionally, knowing how to leave a conversation at an appropriate time. These are all incredibly important things to be learning and to be practicing. Because when we look at some of the bigger overarching problems that we have as a collective, as a community, as a country, a lot of what tends to break down is the communication. So we are learning how to have positive relationships with people. We're learning how to understand where they're coming from, at least hear what they're saying, and hoping that they're doing the same for us. And that's one of the Gemini gifts, and we want to really cultivate that. But before you can cultivate good communication, you want to have at least a general understanding of how you relate to your own intelligence, how you process information. If you are in a partnership, for example, with somebody that needs a lot of time to process information, well, you're going to run into issues if you just want the conversation to be over quickly. So when we're talking about Gemini and we're talking about that messenger, your personal messenger, it's a good idea to get to know that messenger. So I joked in a few episodes earlier about naming that monkey mind that you have, Jack. I named mine Jack, and being curious about what Jack had to say. Where is Jack trying to get in and meddle? It's another interesting facet of that to really look at how, in this case, Jack approaches everything. Is Jack a good communicator? Does Jack understand their own version of intelligence? And it has taken me many, many years to really understand the way that my brain works, the way that my psyche works. And I'm still not all the way there, but it has really gone a long way in helping me communicate, especially in difficult conversations with difficult people. So go ahead and just take a few deep breaths and just tune in to how this information is landing with you. How's it feeling in your body? We leave Taurus season, but we don't leave the body. And when we leave Gemini season for Cancer season next month, we will not leave the mind. These are things that we carry with us. And so we want to always be integrating them. So how is it feeling as we're talking about your mind? And how often have you given these subject matters attention? Are these things that you have thought of about yourself? With Gemini, this is the sign that belongs in the third house. And the third house is the house of our youth, is the house of our elementary school, middle school education, even high school. There's something about this third house where we're staying close to home. So we learn a lot about who we are, how our mind works, our level of intelligence, and I will say our perceived level of intelligence, because I think a lot of us come out of those experiences feeling like we're not as smart as we really are, because the school system is really very homogenized and based on one version of intelligence. And if you're not able to really fit into that version, then it's very easy to slip through the cracks and feel like you're not smart. So as you're doing this work of analyzing, how do I communicate with people? Am I good at communicating? Do I feel like I'm intelligent? How do I process information? As you're doing this work, look back into your past, into your elementary school years, for example. I remember I went to a more of a Waldorf style school for kindergarten and first grade. And then I switched to a public school in second grade, and I did not know how to read, and everybody else knew how to read. So I had to go for about 6 months into special classes. I had to leave my regular classroom and go sit with a reading teacher. And what I learned from that experience was that I was stupid, that there was something wrong with me because I didn't know how to read. And so even though I learned how to read very quickly and I became actually a speed reader, I read much faster than most people, that always stuck with me. I'm not smart. So it's things like that that are so innocent and so innocuous that can really stick with you. And this is a time, as we're going to go in when I go to the forecast, where this Gemini energy, for several reasons, is really loud. And it is really acting like a mirror. And it is helping us to understand some of the influences from when we were young and how they still impact us negatively. Of course, we have things that impacted us positively. That's great. We don't need to necessarily heal those things. So as we're sitting here, I just want you to think and have this in your field of awareness, that if you are sitting there thinking about what you learned about your own intelligence, that you might have some elementary or middle school memories that come into place. Now, middle school memories oftentimes look like getting made fun of by other people. So that can also be hugely impactful, getting teased, getting hassled by your fellow middle school peers. It's not that we have to go back, process those things again, but it is really helpful information to remember. Oh, that's how that started. Because as we are doing this transformational work now, it is a very potent time to let go of those little splinters. It's like the splinters rising to the surface of your skin, ready to come out so that they're not bothering you. The pebbles in your shoe are not kicking around in there anymore. We want to get our minds on board. And that's what I've been teaching you over this whole Gemini season, is how to be so aware when you have errant thoughts that come in, or your mind just wants to lead you on some anxious journey about some potential problem in the future, or you have some belief that is absolutely not true anymore at all about yourself and who you are and how your mind works, because we want to get our messenger like in really good form. We want our messenger bringing us the best information, the most potent information. We want our messenger to be the best employee ever, so that when he or she shows up to deliver the information about the kingdom to our internal king and queen, it's like this trilogy that works, where everything becomes clear. And it's this team that says, my mind comes in and tells me this. My emotions come in and tell me this. My strong sense of self comes in and tells me this. And they're all working in tandem so that you can be the strongest leader of your own kingdom as possible.
We need really strong leaders right now, and we are all very unique leaders. We are all meant to have different skills and different things that we bring to the table. So that is your homework for what to think about this week.
All right, thanks for joining me, you guys. I hope that you learned something, and I will see you all soon.